Fear and offense are two of the biggest faith killers. I think that there really are, and that every Christian has to deal with at some point or another in their life and in their walk. Both of which are tools that are ultimately a means to an end, which is tools that the enemy uses to drive a wedge between people and other people and people and God. Fear is one of those things that all it really does is puts up a wall between us and other people. It essentially gets us to isolate ourselves away from people. Even if we're not physically isolated, we emotionally isolate ourselves, or we socially isolate ourselves, and that's just never a good place to be. Believe me, the enemy knows you're a much easier target when you're by yourself all the time and when you're not around other strong people and other strong believers. So he wants you to be afraid of what they might say and what they might do to you. But the very thing that we have to acknowledge and realize is that there's nothing that any other person can say or do that should cause us to be afraid. And we should never be afraid of other people's responses, because perfect love casts out all fear. And if we really love people, like we're called to love people the way Jesus loves people, then we have to realize, well, if that's what I'm called to, that to love people the way Jesus has loved people, then if perfect love casts out all fear, then why am I afraid of a person that I'm supposed to love? And that's where offense comes in. See, because once we get over the fear aspect, a lot of times what the enemy will try to do is he'll try to get us to take an offense to something that somebody does, or something that somebody doesn't do, or something that somebody says, or the way somebody says something. He would love nothing more than for us to just be so hurt, full of bitterness, angry, and offended in our hearts that we just push people out, we cut ourselves off from community, and we just become essentially a one-man band with an audience before God. But the reality of it is, when we have offense in your heart, it truly makes having a relationship with God almost impossible. Because the reality of it is, even when people hurt you, people aren't your problem, you are. But what tends to actually happen is we allow our hearts to get to this really, really jacked up place so easily, where it's just full of anger and resentment and bitterness and unforgiveness. And the Bible actually tells us that when we hold others' sins against them and refuse to forgive them, God actually doesn't forgive our own sins. And to think that we still have a healthy dynamic in our relationship with God at that point is kind of foolish. It's just downright prideful. But we allow ourselves to get so consumed with thoughts like, well, they should have known better than to do that to me. Well, after what they did to me, I don't want to forgive them. They don't deserve it. Well, then should God give you what you deserve? As Christians, we can still think this way. Let's not fool ourselves into thinking that we don't. Let us not accept it in an attempt to make ourselves feel justified in our anger at the expense of actually walking in holiness. Because it says that we're called to be holy as He is holy. And that is the very thing that the enemy wants to come and attack in you more than anything else. Fear and offense are two things that should never have a foothold in your mind and in your heart. They are something that the devil is going to try to tempt you with every single day of your life. The good news of the gospel and the power of the cross is that we don't have to live under fear anymore. We're no longer slaves to fear. And we don't have to walk where we're easily offended. What if instead of getting offended, we showed people unmerited, unwarranted, unconditional love, just like Jesus showed them? It's really just a choice. Do we deny ourselves, or do we choose to continuously embrace a false identity?